The sound of hammers echoed through the small mountain town of Willow Creek that afternoon, bouncing off the pine-covered hills and settling somewhere between exhaustion and determination. The wind had begun to shift, the air thick with the smell of rain, and the clouds above looked darker than usual. A storm was coming. Ethan Hayes wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, squinting up at the roof he was trying to finish before the weather turned ugly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hands rough and scarred from years of work. Every nail, every shingle, every breath he took felt like a fight against time. He didn't have much, but he had pride, and a promise to keep to his little girl. "Daddy, you missed a spot." A giggle came from below. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, sat on the grass, her small hands clutching a worn-out teddy bear. Her blonde curls were tied up in messy pigtails, her overalls covered in paint stains. Ethan smiled down at her. "I'll get it, sweetheart. You just make sure Teddy doesn't run off again." "I'm watching him," she said proudly, hugging the bear tight. It had been 3 years since her mother left. No note, no goodbye. Just a house full of memories and a little girl who didn't understand why Mommy didn't come back. Ethan had been doing his best ever since, juggling 2 jobs, side work, and every odd repair job he could find in town. The bills were always late, the truck barely ran, but Lily never went to bed hungry. That was what mattered. Today, though, wasn't his house. It was hers, the new neighbor. He didn't know much about her except that she'd moved into the old Miller place up on Ridge Road. Most folks said she was quiet, kept to herself. Some said she was from the city, running from something. Ethan didn't ask questions. All he knew was, her roof was leaking and a storm was coming. When he climbed down from the ladder, she was standing there by the porch, hands folded, watching him with cautious eyes. "Is it gonna hold?" she asked. Her voice was soft, steady, but carried the weight of someone who wasn't used to asking for help. He nodded. "It'll hold. Might need a full replacement later. But this'll get you through the storm. Thank you," she said, almost whispering it. Ethan shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am." She hesitated. "I don't even know what to pay you." He smiled faintly. "Pay what you think is fair. I'm not out here to take advantage of anyone." For a moment she studied him. Then she nodded slowly. "I'm Charlotte." "Ethan," he replied, extending his hand. Her handshake was firm but cold, like she hadn't done that in a long time. The wind picked up then, tossing her dark hair around her face. Ethan noticed she looked tired, not in a physical way, but like someone who'd spent too long pretending to be fine. "You should probably head inside soon," he said, glancing at the horizon. "Storm will be here before dark." "I will," she said, and her eyes softened for a moment. "Thank you again." As he packed his tools, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy," as she sad. Ethan looked toward the house. "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe she's just had a hard day." Lily frowned. "We should bring her cookies." He chuckled. "Maybe after the storm." That night, as thunder rolled in and rain began to fall in sheets, Ethan sat by the window of their tiny house with Lily asleep in his lap. He couldn't stop thinking about Charlotte. Something about her didn't fit. Her quiet voice, the look in her eyes, the way she'd watched him work like she hadn't seen someone fix things for her in a long time. The next morning, the storm had passed. The town was soaked but still standing. Ethan grabbed his jacket and went to check on her place, mostly out of habit, or maybe something deeper he didn't want to name. When he got there, she was already outside, sweeping leaves off the porch. She smiled when she saw him. Small, but real. "The roof held," she said. "Told you it would." She hesitated, then said, "Would you like some coffee?" He almost said no. He had work to do, bills to pay. But something in her voice made him pause. Sure, inside the house was beautiful. Not in a fancy way, but everything felt carefully placed. Books on the table, candles by the window, a painting half finished on an easel. Yet somehow it also felt lonely. They talked about little things at first. The town, the weather, the way the roads flooded every spring. But slowly the conversation drifted deeper. He told her about Lily, about trying to keep things together. She listened quietly, really listened, not with pity but with understanding. When he asked about her life, she hesitated. "I used to work in real estate," she said vaguely. "Things got complicated. I needed to get away." He didn't press her. Everyone was running from something. Weeks passed, and Ethan found reasons, small innocent reasons, to stop by, fix a window, check the gutters, help move a shelf. And every time, Charlotte would insist on paying him, but never in cash. Sometimes with homemade soup, sometimes with art supplies for Lily, sometimes with just a warm meal. Lily adored her. She called her Miss Charlie and would run up the hill after school, bringing her wildflowers and drawings. It became a rhythm, simple, steady, safe, until one evening, while Ethan was fixing the fence near her barn, A black SUV pulled up the driveway. A man in a suit stepped out holding an umbrella. He looked completely out of place in the muddy gravel. "Ms. Whitmore," the man said politely. "You've missed the last 2 board meetings. The investors are getting anxious." Ethan froze. Charlotte's expression shifted, like a curtain dropping. "I told you I needed time," she said firmly. "With all due respect, ma'am, you own half of Whitmore Enterprises. You can't just disappear." Ethan blinked. "Owns half of what?" The man sighed. "The state can only wait so long for its queen to return." Charlotte's jaw tightened. "Tell them I'll call when I'm ready." He nodded stiffly and left. Ethan stood there speechless. The woman he'd thought was a quiet newcomer apparently owned half the state. When she finally turned to him, she looked more vulnerable than ever. "You weren't supposed to see that?" she said softly. "I wasn't supposed to what? Find out you're rich?" he asked, trying to smile, but it came out bitter. "It's not about money," she said. "That life, it broke me. I came here because I wanted to feel human again." Ethan looked at her, confused, hurt, and a little angry. "And you thought pretending to be someone else was the answer?" Her voice trembled. "I didn't pretend. I just didn't want to be treated differently." He exhaled slowly. "Well, congratulations. You fooled me." He grabbed his jacket and walked away before she could say another word. That night the wind picked up again, shaking the trees. Another storm was coming. But this one wasn't in the sky, it was in his chest. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lily asleep beside him. He couldn't shake the image of her face, the sadness in her voice, the truth he hadn't seen. Maybe he judged her too harshly. Maybe it wasn't about what she had, but what she'd lost. The next morning, he got in his truck and drove back up the hill. The wind howled, lightning flashed, and rain had already started to fall. When he arrived, the roof he'd repaired weeks ago was holding strong, but she wasn't outside. Her car was gone. He called her name, his voice lost in the storm, and that's when he saw it, a small note pinned to the porch railing, flapping wildly in the wind. It read, "Thank you for fixing more than just my roof. I'm sorry for not being honest. If I could choose again, I'd still rather be the woman you fixed a house for than the one everyone bows to. Charlotte." Ethan stood there, rain pouring down his face, staring at the words, and in that moment he realized he hadn't fallen for her money, her name, or her past. He'd fallen for her heart. But she was gone, and he had no idea how to find her again. The storm raged through the night, shaking the windows of every house in Willow Creek. By morning, the roads were flooded. Trees were down and power lines hung low like wary travelers. But none of that mattered to Ethan, because when he drove up to Ridge Road again, Charlotte's house stood empty. No note this time, no car, no sign she'd ever been there. He walked through the house, the door creaking open with the wind. Everything was spotless, untouched, like she'd left in a hurry. Her easel was gone, her books packed, her presence erased. But in the corner, sitting on the table beside the window, he found something that stopped him cold. It was a small framed photo of him fixing her roof, with Lily sitting in the grass below. She must have taken it that day. Underneath, a handwritten message, "Some people fix more than what's broken." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't realize how much he'd come to care until the silence screamed her absence. Days turned into weeks. The gossip in town was loud. People whispering about how the rich lady up on Ridge Road had vanished overnight. Some said she went back to her city empire. Others said she'd been hiding from something bigger. But Ethan didn't listen. He just worked, and came home, and tried not to think about her. But he couldn't stop. Sometimes, when he was fixing fences or hauling lumber, he'd hear her voice, soft, steady, thanking him. Sometimes at night, when the house got too quiet, he'd catch Lily sitting by the window, staring at the hill. "Daddy," she'd whisper, "when's Miss Charlie coming back?" He didn't have the heart to tell her he didn't know. "Maybe soon, sweetheart," he'd say instead. But deep down he wasn't sure. Then, one morning, months later, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, expensive paper. No return address. He opened it slowly, reading the first line, and his breath caught. "Dear Ethan, I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. There are things about my life I couldn't explain. Not then. Not without putting you and Lily in danger. I left to finish what I started, to close that chapter for good. I never stopped thinking about you. About the man who fixed my roof when I couldn't fix myself. If you'll still have me, come find me at the address below." See, the address wasn't far. Just 2 towns over, near the city. He didn't hesitate. By noon he had Lily in the truck, her backpack and teddy bear in the back seat. The road was long, but he didn't mind. For once he had direction, something he hadn't felt in years. When they arrived, it wasn't a mansion or a corporate building. It was a small community center under renovation, with a sign that read, Whitmore Foundation for Families in Need. He parked and walked inside, and there she was, Charlotte, standing in jeans and a flannel shirt, hair pulled back, laughing with a group of children as they painted walls. When she turned and saw him, her smile faltered, then grew again, real unguarded. "Ethan," she breathed almost like a prayer. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked closer until they were face to face. "You really did own half the state," he said quietly. She laughed softly. "And I gave half of it away." He frowned. "You what?" She nodded. "After I left, I sold my shares, my properties, everything I didn't need. I started this, a foundation for single parents, people trying to rebuild, people like you." He stared at her, speechless. "Why?" She took a step closer. "Because you showed me what it means to have nothing and still give everything. You fixed my roof without asking for a cent. You gave me something I couldn't buy, kindness. I wanted to do the same for others." Ethan swallowed hard. "You didn't have to leave to do that." Her eyes softened. "I did. I had to prove to myself I could stand on my own, that what I felt for you wasn't about gratitude or escape, but something real." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "So what now?" She hesitated, her voice trembling. "That depends. Do you think you could forgive a woman who ran away to find herself?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I don't need to forgive you. You never owed me anything." Then he reached for her hand. "But I'd like to start over." A tears welled up in her eyes. "Start over?" He nodded. "No secrets, no pretending. Just us." And when she smiled, really smiled, it felt like the sun finally broke through every storm they'd both been trapped under. Months later, Willow Creek saw something it hadn't in years: a wedding. Simple, quiet, surrounded by family, friends, and townsfolk. Charlotte wore a dress she designed herself, no diamonds, no flash, just grace. Ethan wore his best flannel and a nervous grin. Lily stood between them, holding the rings, beaming brighter than the morning sky. When the preacher asked if Ethan would take Charlotte as his wife, he smiled and said, "I already did, the day I climbed her roof." The crowd laughed. Even Charlotte laughed through her tears. After the ceremony, they danced in the town square under string lights. The rain started again, light, gentle, but nobody cared. Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You really did fix my roof before the storm hit." He chuckled. "Yeah, but turns out the real storm was inside both of us." She smiled. "And we survived it." He kissed her forehead. "We didn't just survive, Charlie. We found home." Years later, the people of Willow Creek still told their story, about the struggling single dad who fixed a stranger's roof and found out she owned half the state. But those who knew them best knew the truth. It wasn't about money, or charity, or luck. It was about two broken souls who met at the edge of a storm and learned that love isn't found in what you own, but in what you give. And every time the rain came down on the tin roof of their little farmhouse, the one they built together, Ethan would hold Charlotte close, look at Lily sleeping in the next room, and whisper, "We made it through another one." Because storms, no matter how fierce, don't destroy what's built on kindness. They only prove it's strong enough to last.